Alright, I have a confession. If you haven't noticed by now, I'm kind of lazy when it comes to investing. Personally, I would just rather buy and hold a few different index funds and watch them grow while I sit and relax and laugh at my friends who are desperately searching for the next hot stock. So while there's certainly money to be made by looking for the next Tesla of the world, if you're like me and you're lazy with your investing too, then today let's talk about the top 5 best index funds that you can own forever to have perfect passive investing. Alright, let's jump right into it. What is going on, everyone? I hope you are all having a fantastic day. So, if you're not familiar, an index fund is essentially an investing basket made up of a ton of different stocks or other assets that are specifically picked and curated in order to diversify your money across a particular asset class. So you can have different index funds for the stock market, real estate, emerging markets, international funds, bonds, and a ton of other stuff. But with so many options and all of these fancy finance words that honestly no one really cares about, it can be incredibly difficult to figure out where you should actually be investing your money. So as someone who had to sit through a ton of painful finance lectures in college, today I want to make it really simple for you. So we're going to talk about not only the ticker symbol and what each of these index funds actually are, but I'll quickly show you the top holdings within these funds, an average return, the dividend payouts, the expense ratios, and any minimum investment requirements, as well as the ETF alternatives if you'd rather go with the ETF route, but more on that in a second. Now, quick disclaimer, I am going to be talking about specific types of investments in today's video that you can go out and buy. But as is the case with any type of investment and anytime I talk about investing on the channel, just because I'm talking about it doesn't mean that you should automatically go and purchase that particular asset. As always, do your own research and make those decisions on your own, and in the long term, you will be much better off than had you just blindly listened to some random guy on the internet. Okay, so the first index fund on today's list comes from a small company that you may have heard of before, known as Vanguard. And that would be their Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund Admiral Shares, which is VTSAX. Now, the Admiral Shares thing just means that you get some lower expense ratios and sometimes higher dividend payouts and other benefits, but don't worry about that too much because it really does not matter and absolutely falls under that category of fancy finance words that no one really cares about. So, VTSAX is a total stock market index fund as designated by its name, and its top 3 holdings are currently Apple, Microsoft, and Alphabet, which is Google's parent company if you didn't know. Since it was started in November of 2000, it's had an average annual return of 8.26%, which is pretty good, and it's had an average return over the past 5 years of 16.87%, which is really good. Currently, this pays out a dividend of 1.19%, and it has an expense ratio of just 0.04%, which is not the lowest out there, but once we talk about some of the other index funds on today's list, you'll get a better idea of how those dividend payouts and expense ratios compare. Now, I will tell you that this index fund and most of the index funds from Vanguard do have minimum investment requirements of $3,000 currently, but there is an ETF alternative, which is VTI in this case, which is very similar to VTSAX, but will remove that minimum investment requirement. So if you're just getting started and you don't have a whole lot of money to invest right now, then you might want to look into the ETF alternative, which again is VTI in this case. And remember that an index fund and an ETF are very similar to each other, so don't worry about that one too much. So I tried to pick different index funds that not only are from different companies, but that cover different asset classes as well, because in my opinion at least, there's not really a huge advantage of owning multiple different total stock market index funds, for example, because they're all going to perform very similarly to each other. But something like VTSAX is a great place to get started and will diversify your money across thousands of different companies that would take you so long to research and buy on your own. Moving on from there, the second index fund that you will definitely want to own forever is from another small company that you may have heard of, and that would be Fidelity. And this one is the Fidelity Zero Total Market Index Fund, or FZROX. Similar to VTSAX, which we just talked about, this is Fidelity's flagship version of the Total Stock Market Index Fund. But the big difference with this one that gives it a huge advantage over VTSAX, in my opinion, is that this one has no expense ratio and has no minimum investment requirements. Now, personally, I've always been a huge fan of Vanguard, but Fidelity is a fantastic company as well, and if you're really concerned about those expense ratios and minimum investment requirements, then Fidelity might be your company because they have a lot of different options that remove both of those factors from the equation. The top 3 holdings within FZROX currently are Apple, Microsoft, Microsoft, and Amazon in this case. FZROX has a 3-year average return of 15.98% and a lifetime average return of 16.24%, which is much higher than VTSAX, but what I will say is that this is a much younger index fund and has just started within the past few years, whereas VTSAX is over 20 years old, so it's kind of difficult to compare those lifetime returns to each other, but FZROX has so far performed really well. It currently pays a dividend of 1.05%, and like I said earlier, it has an expense ratio of 0 and no minimum investment requirement. So total stock market index funds are a great place to get started, but the number 3 index fund on today's list is going to move into a different asset class, and that would be the Vanguard Real Estate Index Fund Admiral Shares, or VGSLX. This fund invests in what's called a REIT, or Real Estate Investment Trust, and is a great way to diversify your money across the real estate sector rather than just the stock market, bonds, or some other more traditional form of investment. Its top 3 holdings are currently in the Vanguard Real Estate Index Fund, the American Tower Corporation, and Prologis Inc., which I think is how you say it, but I have no idea. VGSLX has a 5-year average return of 7.54%, and since it was started in 2001, it has averaged 10.52%, which is pretty good considering the major real estate market corrections that have occurred in that time. Currently, it pays a really great dividend of 2.93% and has an expense ratio of 0.12%. So if you're looking to diversify your money even further in asset classes outside of the standard stock market and instead invest in real estate, then VGSLX is definitely one that I would recommend forever. Coming in at number 4 on our list is a bit of an overlap with the first one on this list, but it is another Vanguard staple that I could not forget about, and that would be the Vanguard 500 Index Fund Admiral Shares, also known as VFIAX or VFIAX. Its top holdings are currently Apple, Microsoft, and Alphabet, just like VTSAX earlier, and it has an average annual return of 16.86% over the past 5 years and 7.77% since it was started in November of 2000. VFIAX does have a minimum investment requirement of $3,000, similar to the other Vanguard index funds on this list, but again, it does have an ETF alternative known as VOO, plus it pays a pretty decent dividend of 1.26% and has a low expense ratio of just 0.04%. And lastly, coming in at number 5 on our list for the best index funds that you will definitely want to own forever, in my opinion, would be another one of my favorites from Fidelity, and that is the Fidelity Zero International Index Fund, also known as FZILX. Similar to the Real Estate Investment Index Fund that we looked at earlier in the video, FZILX is an international fund, meaning it's again going to diversify your money internationally instead of just within US stocks or more localized asset classes. Currently, its top holdings are Tencent Holdings and the Taiwan Semiconductor MFG Company. Now, I know that unlike some of the other index funds that we talked about earlier, you may have never heard of some of the companies that are large holdings within this index fund, especially if you live in the US. But remember that this is an international fund, and there are so many international opportunities that can help you better diversify your money, so even if you haven't heard of some of these holdings before, don't worry about it too much, and remember that you are getting a more diversified form of investment. Now, the best part about this fund, just like the other Fidelity funds on this list, is that it has no expense ratio and no minimum investment requirements, which is awesome if you are just getting started. Plus, FZILX currently pays a dividend of 1.5%, which, by the way, I should have clarified this earlier, but a dividend is a payout that you get just for owning that stock or index fund in this case. So not only will your investment hopefully appreciate over time, but you will also get paid a percentage of your investment in the form of that dividend payout, which personally I always reinvest back into the asset in order to earn more dividends in the future, which buys more of that asset, which earns more dividends, and hopefully at some point I will finally be able to afford guac on my Chipotle bowl or something nice like that. So there you have it. Those are my top 5 favorite index funds that you can buy and hold forever and probably come out way ahead of the average professional fund manager. If you take nothing else from this video, allow this to be your friendly reminder that investing does not need to be complex or costly, and while this is absolutely not financial advice and is strictly for entertainment purposes, I think most of us would agree that by purchasing just a few index funds or ETFs, you can set yourself on the track to achieving serious financial freedom that a lot of other people can only dream about. Now, if you're curious about the best brokerages to buy these index funds through, I will leave a link in the description below to a recent video that I made on the best Roth IRA accounts, since for most of us Plus, the Roth IRA is probably the best vehicle to start investing within because you're also going to get a ton of insane tax advantages. So I would love to know what your favorite index fund or ETF currently is and why you feel that is the best fit for you and your long-term investing goals. As always, if you did get value out of today's content and you want to help support me, the easiest way to do that is actually by checking out some of my favorite financial tools down in the description below, many of which will give you some free money when you sign up, which we always love. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this in the future. And of course, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it so much. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.